She doesn't want comfort. She wants to know if you'll burn for truth. She doesn't ask if you can handle her. She becomes the storm and watches to see if you vanish. The test isn't a riddle you solve. It's a mirror you stand in front of. And if you blink, if you flinch, if you reach for your rehearsed lines, she already knows. You're not ready. She'll never ask for strength. She'll demand it without words, with the way her energy shifts, with silence that feels louder than argument, with a look that cuts deeper than speech. You'll feel it in the way she used to reach for you and now folds her arms instead, in the way her questions now carry an edge, a tone that makes you question yourself. And that's where most men fold. They think it's about her being moody or unreasonable or distant. They don't understand what's really happening. They're not being rejected. They're being initiated. The unconscious feminine doesn't whisper. It doesn't instruct. It calls forth the unconscious masculine through contradiction, through mystery, through a kind of radiant disorder that threatens everything fake inside a man. Jung understood this. Before we turned strength into a hashtag or called emotional resilience toxic, he saw this drama playing out deep inside the human soul. When she pulls back, when she seems to vanish emotionally, it's not cruelty, it's calling. Not a call to control her, but to command yourself. And most men, never having met their own inner woman, the anima, panic. They crumble beneath her shift. They explain themselves, they apologize for things they didn't do, they beg, they lose themselves trying to please her. Not because she demanded it, but because her chaos exposed the hollowness of their center. You're not being tested for kindness. You're being tested for containment. Not control, not dominance, but the ability to hold without reacting. The strength to stay present when everything in you wants to flee or fix. When she changes without warning, when her warmth disappears, when her eyes start watching you like you're a stranger. It is not sabotage, it is evolution. The feminine tests to see if there's anything in you besides ego. She's not asking if you can recite affirmations. She's asking if you can remain unmoved, not emotionally dead, but internally rooted, when her moods become hurricanes. Because if her storm pulls you under, it's not about her power, it's about your ungroundedness. Men think women want security through safety, but the deepest feminine craves a different kind of security, the security of presence. She wants to know that when her emotions rise like waves, your spine doesn't snap, that you don't disappear into apology or aggression, that you don't become another child in the room when she's already trying to wrestle her own emotions. This is the test. And it's not something she planned. It's instinctual. It's the feminine's biological intelligence. Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming whole. And a man who hasn't integrated the feminine within him will always be at the mercy of the women around him. He'll orbit their moods. He'll lose sleep over their silence. He'll become a man whose entire identity is a reflection of whether or not she's smiling. It's not about love, it's about dependency. He didn't meet the woman inside himself, so now he's chasing her in every woman he meets. And the more she retreats, the more he dissolves. The nice guy, the romantic, the approval seeker. These are not men. These are boys with facial hair. And women can sense the absence of soul, even if they can't articulate it. So she tests. She withdraws. She challenges, not because she wants to see you suffer, but because she needs to see what you're made of. The truth is, she doesn't even know she's testing you, but some part of her knows that the mask you wear, your charm, your agreeableness, your politeness, it isn't real, and she wants to see what happens when it's threatened. The feminine does not honor performance, it honors presence, and that means being able to hold your light and your shadow at once, your tenderness and your fire, your vulnerability and your boundary, because if you only show one half, you're lying, and if you're lying, she can't trust you. Jung warned that men who don't face their shadows project them. They turn women into their therapists, their judges, their saviors. But a woman isn't supposed to complete you, she's supposed to reflect you. And if you disappear in her reflection, she'll lose interest, not because she stopped loving you, but because you stopped existing. There's a difference between being stoic and being sovereign. One hides emotions, the other holds them. And a woman doesn't want a statue, she wants a center. A place where she can fall apart without destroying you. When she cries, she doesn't want you to fix it. When she doubts, she doesn't want you to argue. She wants to feel that your love is not fragile, that your presence is not conditional, that you are there not to manage her, but to meet her. Because the woman is not asking for a manager. She's asking for a mirror that doesn't crack. The untested man will always blame the woman. He'll say she's too emotional, too confusing, too demanding. But the truth is, she's confronting everything in him that he never resolved. His need to be liked, his fear of being seen, his terror of rejection. That's what the test reveals. That's why it hurts. She's not trying to be cruel. She's inviting you to become. But you cannot become if you cannot remain. You cannot pass a test you think is about her. You pass it the moment you realize it's about you. And that's the paradox. The moment you no longer react, the test stops feeling like a test. You stop needing her approval. You stop chasing her warmth. And suddenly she feels something ancient, a presence that doesn't vanish in discomfort, a man who isn't moved by confusion. And in that moment the test dissolves. Not because she stopped, but because you became. Her chaos calms, not because you silenced her, but because she finally found something that didn't collapse when she leaned into it. Most men want to be loved. Few are willing to be initiated. They want her affection, but not her fire. But the feminine does not grant intimacy to the uninitiated. She waits, she tests, she pushes, she withdraws. Not because she wants control, but because she's trying to find out, can you hold her without needing her to be anything other than what she is? If you need her to be soft before you can be strong, you've already lost. If your masculinity depends on her mood, it's not masculinity, it's performance. And it will fail. It will fail when she cries, it will fail when she screams, it will fail when she stops being your fantasy and becomes a full-spectrum being. This is the fire of the feminine, and if you are afraid of being burned, stay out of the ritual. Because love is not found in comfort. Love is forged in confrontation. The confrontation with who you are when the world around you changes. When she stops smiling, when she pulls away, when she stops responding to the man you pretend to be and demands to meet the man you really are. The test is always the same. Will you remain? Will you stay? Not as a tactic, not to win her back, but because you know who you are, even when she doesn't validate it. Because the second you show her that your truth is non-negotiable, something wild in her relaxes. Not because she lost, but because she finally found someone who doesn't need her to play small for him to feel big. You cannot out-talk the feminine. You cannot outmaneuver her instincts with charm. What you call confusion, she calls intuition. And her body, her silence, her pullback, it knows when you're bluffing. You may fool her mind for a moment, but her soul recognizes emptiness. You could be eloquent, educated, empathetic, and still she will recoil if she senses that you are out of alignment with yourself. The modern man has been taught to chase validation instead of embodying value. He fears rejection more than dishonesty, so he curates his image, edits his voice, makes himself agreeable in order to avoid the fire. But that fire is exactly where his masculine is meant to be born. When she withdraws her energy, it is not always a punishment, It is sometimes a sacred vacuum, an opportunity. The question is not, how do I win her back, but who do I become in her absence? If you collapse, beg, explain, overtext, overthink, then you have answered the test with failure. Because her absence wasn't designed to ruin you, it was designed to reveal you. Will you still lead when no one follows? Will you hold your truth when no one claps for it? Will you still speak your values when they fall on deaf ears? Most men cannot. Most men crumble in the silence. They mistake withdrawal for abandonment and mistake the test for betrayal. But she is not betraying you. She is watching what breaks when she stops giving. And this isn't manipulation, it's biology. It's archetypal, it's ancient, it's the echo of a feminine wisdom that says, if you cannot hold the storm, you cannot hold me. Because to love a woman in her fullness is to love the full range of the feminine. Her rage, her chaos, her softness, her need, her withdrawal, her fire, her beauty, her breakdown. And if you only show up for her pleasure and disappear for her pain, you are not a partner. You are a passenger, and the feminine does not trust passengers. She wants to know if you'll drive when the road disappears. That's why she tests, not with logic, with energy, with unpredictability, with silence. The moment she senses that your presence is contingent on her behavior, she stops trusting it. The feminine needs to push, not to destroy, but to feel. To feel that your presence is not a negotiation. To feel that when she is at her most incoherent, not because you fixed her, but because you didn't lose yourself in her fire. That's what earns trust. Not flowers, not texts, not soft words, but immovable presence. Jung knew that until a man integrates his anima, the inner feminine, he remains split. He seeks the woman outside to resolve the woman within. And every test from her feels like an attack instead of an invitation. But once a man integrates her within himself, he no longer reacts to her shifts. He honors them because he's been there. He knows what it means to feel deeply, to be unpredictable, to long for safety without control. He no longer fears the feminine because he no longer fears himself. That's when the tests stop hurting. That's when the game dissolves, because now, when she pulls away, you don't panic, you breathe. When she doubts, you don't over-explain, you hold. When she explodes, you don't retreat, you stay. Not as a savior, not as a martyr, but as a man who no longer needs her mood to define his identity. You become a witness, not a react mirror. Not a rescuer, and suddenly she feels something rare, a space where she can be fully woman, without carrying the weight of being your emotional regulator. You're not here to pass her tests by pretending they don't affect you. You're here to transform through them, to see them not as judgments but as reflections of where you still need grounding. Every time she withdraws love, she's asking, is your love for yourself still enough? Every time she pulls away, she's asking, do you disappear when I do? And every time she tests, she's asking, is your masculinity real, or is it just a performance dependent on my approval? Most men think strength means stoicism, but true strength is responsiveness without reactivity. It is the ability to hold your ground with compassion, to speak truth without domination, to be fully present without grasping. This is what makes you dangerous, not your aggression, not your dominance, but your immovability in the face of emotional chaos. Not because you're unaffected, but because you are anchored. She wants to feel that, even if she doesn't say it, especially when she doesn't say it. You want her respect? Stop chasing her approval. You want her trust? Stop collapsing into her moods. You want her submission? Stop trying to control. Be so grounded in who you are that her tests become irrelevant. Not because she stops testing, but because you stop needing to pass. And that's when everything shifts. That's when she starts to lean in, not because you manipulated her, not because you said the right words, but because she feels, finally, someone who doesn't need her weakness to feel strong. She doesn't need your poetry if it's masking your fear. She doesn't need your gifts if they're covering guilt. She doesn't need your apologies if they're rooted in insecurity. She needs your truth, and your truth must remain, even when she withdraws affection, even when she storms, even when she forgets why she loved you in the first place. Because the real test is not, can you win her? The real test is, can you stand without her? And if you can't, then your presence was never yours to begin with. It was borrowed. And she felt it. There's a reason ancient rites of passage stripped men of comfort, threw them into the wild, made them confront death, silence, hunger. Because only in discomfort do you meet yourself. And only by meeting yourself can you meet her. Not the idea of her, not the fantasy, but the full, real woman who will sometimes love you fiercely and sometimes vanish into her own darkness. If you want that kind of love, you must be that kind of man, a man who doesn't need to be needed to feel whole. That is the man who passes the test. Not because he wanted to, but because he stopped needing to. His worth isn't on trial. His presence isn't for sale. He doesn't perform masculinity, he embodies it. And when she feels that, she softens. Not because he demanded it, but because she finally feels safe enough to stop testing. And that's the final irony. The man who no longer fears her withdrawal is the one she never wants to leave.